Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on conceal carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am mad at the Zuck.
And the Zuck can't stop the signal.
That's right. You can't stop us.
Man,
the Zuck can't even handle us right now.
Well, you see, here's the deal, guys. So normally we broadcast on Facebook Live. And last week we couldn't, right? It gives me this error, some access token crap thing, right? And so I was like, all right, so there might be a problem with Zoom or, the connection, whatever. So I do 3 different podcasts. So the third one is on Wednesdays that I do. And Church Planter Podcast, go on there, no problem. Shares just fine to the Facebook page.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, they fixed whatever the problem is. This morning, try to do From Concealment again. It denies me. I think, because it's a gun podcast and Zuck doesn't like the gun.
That's exactly right. What else could it be?
Nothing.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I just had a momentary freak out because we both shared it on here, and for whatever reason, I don't think it's showing. It's just looking at it. It's not letting us share it.
Is it not letting us share it?
No. Yeah, that's weird. All right, so I'm suspicious. But anyway, I just accidentally our podcast.
See, now I got double.
Is it playing on your end?
Yeah, it's playing on my end.
Okay, well, that's working on that end. It's not, when I go to our page, it's not showing. So it's showing that we shared it, but it's not actually showing the video. So I don't know. Anyway, Zuck is messing with it. But I just had a freak out because I have a client that is totally unrelated to guns. Not sure where they stand, but their logo at a glance looks similar. And I freaked out that I might have
shared it to the client page.
I didn't. We were okay, but I had a freak out. Whew, we're okay.
I put, can you see the podcast? And it didn't share it. It just put that line.
We're blackballed, Pete.
Dude, the Zuck strikes again.
It makes me mad, man. Oh.
What? Dude, I'm telling you, man, that's Zucker. He's a Zucker. There's no other way to put it.
I got to tell you, though, I was a little bit disappointed that we hadn't had anything stopping us so far. So part of me is like, okay, well, finally somebody noticed. I was feeling, it's almost like when all your friends are getting persecuted and you're not, you're like, what am I doing wrong?
Well, what about me, guys? What about me?
Like, if you haven't really upset the Zuck, are you doing freedom right?
I know, right?
Yeah. So, well, hey, Freedom Nation, sorry you can't catch us on the Zuck book, but hopefully you can still catch us on the Apple Tunes and or on the Google Tunes or the
until we get banned from those
or the Spotify Tunes. Yeah, until we get
only
banned.
A matter of time.
Yep. And then you know what? You'll have to go straight to the podcast website to listen. And
do we have one of those?
Do we? Did we used to?
We did at one time. I don't know. If
we still are. So find us however you can find us. We'll start downloading it onto zip drives, and you can mail in, and we'll mail you the zip drive. It'll be good,
dude. What did you think of that meme that I reposted? When you slap a stock on your AR pistol and drill the third hole, I paid for the whole Second Amendment, so I'm going to use the whole Second Amendment.
Exactly right. I thought that was beautiful. Here's what's funny. I was scrolling down on my Facebook feed, saw that, and was like, oh, this has got to go on the Freedom Nation Telegram. And then I'm like, and then I saw it was you. So I'm like, Pete's on top of this. This is good.
Already shared it to the Telegram group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, man, I've actually thought that exact thing about an AR pistol. I'm like, hey, if this whole thing ends up in a divorce, shall we say, in the United States, I'm slapping a stock on the AR pistol. I mean, it's just there you go.
Actually, I almost said something foolish on here. Let's just being honest. If we get to where that stuff gets banned anyway, then like, why not? Like at that point, who cares? Like once we're in the place where it's like, you're going to jail if they catch you anyway. So live your life, man. Be free. I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm saying, I don't want to go to jail. I'm saying if the divorce happens, and in every divorce, it's always heated, shall we say.
Yeah.
In that case, then,
Yeah. It's heated up like a fuel filter can on the end.
Oh, dude, what about that article? Man, did you post it? I don't know who posted it, but some dude ordered a fuel filter from China. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He ordered the fuel filter from China. It goes through customs. They write up the warrant, and they go search his house, take 5 guns, and the judge dismisses the case because they lied on the application for the warrant. What they said was he bought a suppressor from China. What he bought was a fuel filter. It was not a suppressor yet. And so the judge goes, you can't go after someone because you think they're going to commit a crime. Yeah. And he threw it out.
That tells you, man, they are watching like crazy.
Oh, dude, we all don't. Whenever we see those ads on Facebook, you or I like tag the other person and go, ATF is really trying hard, man.
I know. I'm like, not today, ATF.
Don't buy that crap from anybody. Facebook, Google, wherever you see it. I'm telling you, it's the ATF. Don't buy it.
Yeah. It's so shady, man. It cannot be trusted.
That guy now is apparently suing the ATF, trying to get his guns back because they still took the guns.
Yeah.
And were they bad? Were they against whatever rule? Yeah. I mean, who knows?
Man, that's the kind of stuff where like the whole innocent till proven guilty seems to have been completely disregarded.
Oh yeah.
Completely disregarded.
A big part of it, I think, came about in the 80s when they were like so frustrated that they couldn't win any cases because it's so bent in favor of the people. And so it was like, what corners can we cut? What can we do to nail people? And that's where we've ended up today, which is you're guilty until proven innocent.
Man. Well, and so much of that stuff gets pushed through in the name of law and order. It's like, see these bad guys getting away. We got to do something about this. It's too easy to get away. And then what ends up happening is good people, unfortunately, don't think it through. And they're like, oh, this is just to catch the bad guys. And so they cheer when freedoms are given up. And I was actually listening to James White was talking about how, civil justice is supposed to work from a biblical perspective. And he says, part of what works, what makes it work, was we recognize that innocent till proven guilty means in this life, there are going to be people that get away with it.
Yeah.
And you have to be.
And you would rather them get away with it than an innocent guy go to jail.
Right. And from a biblical perspective, you take solace in the fact that God's wrath is worse than man's wrath. And that the rapist who somehow got away with it, the murderer somewhere who got away with it, eternally is going to face wrath for that. And that's where you're like, well, if we didn't catch him, God sure will. And there's comfort in that. And unfortunately, when you lose sight of an eternal picture of things, the tendency is to be like, well, we better get whatever we can in this life, even if it means somebody getting punished who didn't deserve it. At least we got the bad guy. And that's kind of the way they see it, unfortunately. So,
yeah. Hey, so tell everyone about the latest news, Supreme Court, because I got my own thoughts on this that I want to share.
Yeah. Wow. Long. It's early in the process, but we know it's been a long time since a legitimate case related to the Supreme Court has been related to the Second Amendment has been picked up by the Supreme Court. However, just recently, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a pretty serious gun case related to conceal carrying, and I think it's focusing on New York, if I'm remembering correctly.
Of course it is.
Right.
It's
and it's essentially in New York for you. By the way, if you're not familiar, to even own a gun in New York State is very difficult, mostly because of New York City controlling the rest of the state. But essentially, you have to have a quote unquote proper cause to be able to carry a gun for self-defense. So essentially, you've got to essentially prove your need to carry a gun before they give you the right to carry it, at least in a conceal carry perspective. And really, in all practicality, that goes to gun ownership in general, not just carrying. So this has gone all the way up. It looks like it went through the Ninth Circuit Court.
No, it couldn't be ninth if it's New York.
Hold on. No, it wasn't.
Ninth is
I'm sorry, I'm reading the article wrong. They're referencing another law that was from another state that the Ninth Court addressed. But so essentially, this is finally headed to Supreme Court. We're going to see what happens. So, Pete, did you have thoughts?
I have thoughts. So, based on the current makeup of the Supreme Court, I believe that unless New York tries to, make the case moot like they did with the last one, which is, let's quickly change the law so the Supreme Court doesn't say anything, and therefore this becomes basically the law of the land, which is what they did last time, because all the other states like California and New Jersey were like, guys, you're going to screw this up for all of us. You can't let them decide on this case. You got to change your law so that way, we can still have our crazy laws. But here's the thing. We have examples that the Supreme Court has ruled, like a firearm that's in common use can't basically be banned. And yet, what do we see the federal courts do? They are now at the point where they ignore the Supreme Court precedents and just say, "I lose you." Did I lose you?
No, I'm back. Something went weird.
That was weird.
It paused, and then it says Pete Mitchell is the host now. I'm like, no crap. Pete's been the host the whole time.
Right when we get into all this government talk, all of a sudden the tech companies come after us.
Zoom is Chinese.
Well, then they should have no problem with this. They should be like, yes, let's cause strife over there.
You would think, except they're...
Yeah. Anyway.
They're like, if we can get the guns banned, then we can invade.
Yeah, well, too late, man. It doesn't matter. It's way too late for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but here's the thing. They're going to ignore the Supreme Court knowing full well that the Supreme Court will not take up the cases to hear them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way the Supreme Court's been for the last 10 years. They've been like, hey, we already ruled on this. Why are you going to make us rule again? You need to look at our precedents. But the lower courts, Ninth Circuit as a great example, is basically like, screw it. We're not gonna worry about it.
Yep.
So I think that no matter what happens, and I do think the Supreme Court, based on its current makeup, they'll basically say, no, you can't stop someone from carrying a gun. The Second Amendment says they have the right to keep and bear arms. Bear arms includes outside of the house.
Yeah.
I think they'll say, yes, you can still, make them license it, whatever, but it's going to have to be basically like Heller. 30 days, you got to issue it, that kind of a thing. You can't make them prove good cause, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're going to have the Ninth Circuit just ignore it.
Yep.
That's what I think we're going to see.
So these are talk about like, we're now in a place where those courts are disregarding not only the law, but the ruling of the higher court.
Right.
If that's not tyranny, like what is? So that's where I'm trying to remind people that like we are moving into a time where the legitimacy of our own government is past questioning. It's compromised. Like things are not functioning as they're supposed to. And actually this Sunday, I'm planning to preach at our church on the role of government and when do you obey? When do you not obey? And I always like to point out like, we are talking about a government that's not following the rules that are indeed the law of the land, which puts us in just a whole new category, brothers. Right. On that topic, I am reading A Defense of Liberty Against the Tyrants, Vindicae contra Tyrannos, available from Canon Press. This was written essentially by the Huguenots when the King of France was persecuting the Protestants. Really interesting read, by the way. Historical argument for like when do you need to use force to stop tyrants. Also reading Slaying Leviathan. The guy's last name is Sunshine, who wrote the book. 2 great books, and now is a great time to be reading those books, brothers. Especially, I mean, these are obviously from a Christian perspective, Reformed perspective. The idea of like, we are not advocating for lawlessness. We're advocating for our magistrates to follow the law. And that's not a bad thing to do. That's not a disruption to Romans 13. That's not a disobedience to Scripture. It's obedience to Scripture. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Supreme Court, how this all goes down. As you say, I think we're going to see somebody's going to pull this thing out, reverse a ruling so that they don't get a Supreme Court ruling.
The only thing is, I don't know how they can do that because I don't know the case well enough, right? I just heard little bits and pieces about it as we've been waiting to see them, if they're going to pick up a 2A case. I know 4 out of the 5 cases they had before them, they rejected. And this was the only one that they decided to take up. So I don't know enough about it. However, knowing New York and knowing how they feel about guns, I don't see how they could possibly reverse, like, oh, we're going to go ahead and let you have a gun and carry it. Like, I just can't see them doing that because they hate guns so much. And the reality is this, I was thinking about this morning. It's not that they hate guns. It's that they hate anyone else having guns.
Exactly right.
Because if you look at these police departments, that despite all the evidence that shows an armed society is much safer, what we still see are these police departments going, oh no, there's going to be too many guns on the streets. We don't want people to have guns. What they really mean is, I want to be the only one with a gun.
Yeah.
And the reality is this, if I was the only one with a gun, I would prefer that as well. Right?
Oh yeah. I get that.
Who doesn't prefer that? But that's not the right way.
Yeah. Well, it really comes back to this whole idea of we prefer dangerous freedom to tyranny. And I would argue that, again, we're safer when more people have guns. I would actually make the argument that is safer. But I understand for the cop that doesn't know what the assailant is going to have in his hand, I recognize that makes it a little bit more of a question. I would actually say, though, that like he could still have that gun even if we ban them. So it's not going to make a big difference. But I understand his thinking. But it's like, hey, your job is to uphold the Constitution, though. The whole point is for you to preserve our freedom. So if you want our freedom taken away, well, then you're worthless already. And that's the language I'm trying to make sure people get. Like, either you are in a job to protect and serve us and defend the Constitution, or you're not. And if you're not, you're worthless. If you are, then you have my sympathy and my support on things, especially all the mess right now where like LeBron's whole tweet upset at the cop who like shot the girl with a knife. And I'm like, give the cops a break. I think cops make a lot of dumb decisions, but I'm like, come on. Like,
what would we have said had she stabbed the other person?
Oh, they would be blaming him for not doing anything.
For not stopping the situation.
Yeah. Well, and this is an example of a situation in which we're past anybody caring about the evidence or what's true. The game is blame cops, and which makes it difficult for guys like us where we're like, hey, sometimes the cop did the wrong thing. Sometimes the cop did the right thing. Can we look at the evidence and try to give credit where credit is due and judgment where judgment is due? But no, we're in a time where they're like, you blame the cop whether he did the right thing or not. I'm like, this is crazy. And you know what? A society can't function like this.
Right.
You like, we're witnessing the implosion of a society. My hope is that the left just implodes faster. They are eating each other at a pretty fast rate, but man, they're going to do a whole lot of damage while their ship is going down. So
there is I'm trying to find it right now. There it is. Well, this is one of them. There's a Facebook page called the Free Thought Project 4.0 because they've been banned so many times. And I think the other one is like Police the Police 4.0.
Yes.
I have to routinely unfollow their pages and then come back later because I get so pissed.
Yeah.
When I see the blatant, just time and time again, cops screwing people over, killing people. And I'm like, I don't actually hate cops, but you look at how much corruption there is, literally corruption. Like one of the ones I was watching recently was some city had a bike tax. If you were on a bike, you had to pay a tax. And so these kids, mind you, were riding through that city. They didn't live in that city. They were riding through the city. And the police came, ticketed them, arrested one of them, and took their bikes. And
that's tyranny.
Then the cop said on video, you see this, I'm doing this for your safety.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I have to unsubscribe because I get so pissed when I see these guys doing crap like that.
I know. Well, and then when you talk to even reasonable cops, that, man, holding guys like that accountable almost never happens.
Right.
Almost never happens. And I'll give some understanding that, like, guys who do try to hold people accountable, things go bad for them. And I mean, I've had that in my own industry. Like, I've tried to hold other pastors accountable, and it has not always gone well for me. So I know it's not exclusive to that, but like, either you're the guy who stands up for what's right, or you're part of the problem. And unfortunately, there's a whole lot of good cops that are part of the problem because they're not willing to,
Dude, so I got to share a story with you, man. This is kind of crazy. This is kind of crazy. People have different opinions on this. Honestly, I don't know exactly where I stand on it. Actually, I probably do. But so a friend of mine went to Club Fed for about 2 years. Good buddy of mine. I have shared this before. I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast. I knew the dude was innocent. I knew everything about the situation. I worked at the company that he was at. And I knew that the only reason why he pled guilty was because if he didn't, he'd go to jail for 12 years. Like, you're not going to win against the government. They'd already bled him dry, bled the other co-defendants dry. So anyway, he goes to Club Fed for 2 years. The owner of the company, and by the way, he was an employee. Like, he didn't own any of the company. He didn't get any of the profit of the company. He got nothing, right? Yeah. So the owner of the company gets like 8 or 9 year sentence, something like that, because it wasn't his first offense. It was, a second offense. And that was who they really wanted to begin with. And so anyway, he goes to jail for like 2 years, and then COVID happens. And so his wife, God bless her, is like every day calling the prison, you got to let him out. You got to let him out. Yeah, I don't want to get in COVID. Well, I guess they had some, ruling that they passed. I don't know if Congress did it or the BOP did it, Bureau of Prisons, or whoever did it, but basically said, okay, these low-level offenders, we'll go ahead and put them on house arrest. And by the way, house arrest sucks. Like, my buddy, when he got out, he was on house arrest for, I think, 4 or 5 months, and it was actually worse than being in prison. As crazy as that sounds, because, by the way, when they're in prison, like at this low level, you're in what's called a federal camp. It's called a camp for a reason. There's not even a wall around it. Like, if someone leaves, they call it a walk off. It's not a breakout because you literally just walked off. Yeah. That's actually better than being on house arrest. House arrest sounds like, oh, it's nice. No, it's actually not cool at all. You're
under real watch.
Yeah, you've got the GPS on you. They call at all hours, and you have to answer the phone. If you don't, you're going back to jail. If you're going to leave the house, which is, you can leave. Like, you can leave to go to work. Everything has to be given to the people who are in charge the week before, down to the minute. So you can't deviate from that. You can't, like, oh, on my way home, I'm going to stop off and go through the drive-through at McDonald's. No. That wasn't on, we didn't know that's where you were, and you could go back to jail. So anyway, long story short, he's on house arrest. And my buddy this morning goes, hey, I just happened to be watching C-SPAN, and they had the head of the Bureau of Prisons, answering Congress. And they're like, well, we got the state of emergency going on. What about those 5,000 prisoners that were released early? What's going to happen after we're out of the state of emergency? And he's like, well, then, if they still have time left to serve, then they'll have to come back. So, dude, he was in for 2 years. Biden just he just declared the state of emergency for another year. So he's got basically another year, and then potentially might have to go back for another 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine the disruption in your life? Like, he's got young kids, by the way, like really young kids. And it's like, okay, you had to leave your business, everything, go to jail. I get it, right? I mean, and then you're able to come home. You got to get a job again, right? Because you got to support yourself. And that's basically the only thing you can leave your house for is going to work or whatever's pre-approved. And you do something for 2 years only to go back to then have to come back and start all over again.
It's ridiculous.
Dude, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. In many cases, crimes that I would say probably don't warrant jail time.
Well, what I can tell you about this situation is it was complete BS. Like, I knew everything that happened. And what happened was the FTC shut down the company. And then about a month before the statute of limitations ran out, they turned it over to the DOJ. And the DOJ goes, oh, we'll go ahead and take this case. We think we can basically just force them into a plea agreement. And that's basically what they did. They, were in pretrial motions for like 3 years or something like that, bleeding you dry. So you got no money left. Like, my buddy was down to his public defender. I think all of them were down to a public defender by that point. And it was like, we got no money. We can't fight you anymore. Like, fine, just give me a plea. I'll go to jail. And then I can be home free again. So, I mean, it was like, I knew the whole situation. I actually read every court document and I was like, they're totally lying. Like, they're completely lying. I have firsthand knowledge. I know this is a lie, and they get away with it because they got prosecutorial immunity.
Yeah.
They can say whatever they want.
Do whatever they want. Man, if we got rid of prosecutorial immunity as well as qualified immunity.
Yeah.
And I know people are like, what? Why you're putting cops in danger? I'm like, listen, man, like, all we're saying is like, let's
don't break the rules and then they won't be in danger.
Yeah. And like, my thought is, I think, was it you that was making the suggestion, like, make cops pay for their own insurance? Like, my wife's a licensed counselor. She has to pay for insurance. Doctors have to pay for their insurance. And if they make a whole bunch of mistakes, well, the insurance goes up, and that's a de-incentive for them to disincentivizes them to stay in business, right? So there's a way in which the free market can actually protect us, and so if we have police in that situation,
also, if you made the police unions themselves have to pay for the civil judgments against the cops that break the rules, you're going to have cops enforcing the other cops and like forcing
exactly
them.
right.
Don't you dare break that rule. Don't you dare beat that innocent guy. We're not paying for your mistake.
Exactly.
Right now it comes out of taxpayer money. So, what do they care?
Yeah. Well, and so think about how all of these, like, effectively, I'm paying for when the police brutalize me. Like, if I sue them, I've essentially paid for it with my taxes, right? And it's the old Thomas Sowell quote, like, you don't want people making decisions when they don't face consequences for the results. And so he applies that to economics and politics. But man, if there is some way, I mean, it's kind of like when you work for a business that does profit sharing, and you talk to these guys that work for these big businesses, and they're like, you know what, we'll fly coach. We'll keep it cheap because we know that, like, I make more money if I save the company money, and the whole company does better as a result. And so I keep telling people, like, we need these principles at play in law enforcement and in prosecution. Probably not going to happen, but it sure would be great.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, well. So that's all that, man. We've already covered a couple of topics there.
I know. I will say I'm really curious to see what happens with the Kerry case with the Supreme Court, because I would love to see the Supreme Court basically come back and say, you can't deny people the right to carry a gun. And I mean, I would love to see this stupid state I live in become free. Freer. It wouldn't be free.
That's a way it could happen right there, man. Because if you have that go down at the Supreme Court level, well, then, people in your state have the right effectively to sue their state for their own freedom, and they can cite that that Supreme Court case.
Right. Because we already have the Ninth Circuit Court recently said in a Hawaii case, you don't have the right to carry a gun. And they had said back in, I think, 2016, You don't have the right to, it was either open carry was that one, and then this one was conceal carry. So basically they just said, you don't have the right to bear arms when you take both of their decisions, because one was for open carry, one was for concealed carry. And it's like, okay, so if we finally get the Supreme Court going, no, you do have the right to concealed carry. I mean, I'd take either one, open or conceal, but honestly, open in California, I'm going to get shot. Like the cops are just going to shoot me.
Yeah.
And be like, well, he had a gun on him. So,
Well, and most of us prefer to conceal carry anyway, just because it's, well, to some degree, you have element of surprise and if there is indeed a situation where you need to use it. And also, as we say, we know that there are people that are just uncomfortable around guns, and I think we should be more comfortable as a society with people open carrying. But yeah, most of us are going to opt to conceal carry anyway. So that's the one I'd have first.
Absolutely, it's a better situation. It's better for people not to know you're the guy with the gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in agreement 100% on that. It's just I take either one.
Yeah. And you're saying now, I would say I want people to have the right for both, but if I'm going to have one first, let's get conceal first is normally what I'm thinking.
Right.
Yeah, man. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that. I have a brief product review that I should bring attention to. I've got a bad one and a good one. So since it's busted now, I'm just going to go ahead and say, so I went to some great effort to get myself a hybrid lower without anybody knowing about it. All legally, didn't do anything illegal at all, but I just did it in such a way that it was just not going to be traceable to me in any way. And, but it's the hybrid lower. It's the Liberator you get from Hybrid 80, or I forget who I got it from, but Hybrid 80 is, I think, who is the main manufacturer of them. And I like the concept. I'm not going to say a bad thing about the hybrid lower, but I am going to say something bad about the jig. So the idea is this hybrid lower comes with a plastic jig that you use to mill this thing out. So I get the thing. I wait for a day when I don't have distractions, because I know I want to be really careful with this. First thing I noticed, though, is that I'm reading the directions for this jig, and I'm like, those numbers don't seem right. So like the depth number and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking around a little bit, and I'm seeing that there are a variety of different statements on how deep you need to drill using the jig's top as your guide. And so I followed the directions on the jig itself, and it didn't even drill down low enough to be able to get your what do you call it? Your trigger pins in. And so I'm like, well, obviously this is not low enough. So I remeasured, I rechecked everything, reread the directions, and I'm like, either the directions are really not clear or they're just wrong. I could be reading them wrong, but I'm like, so then I'm like, something's not right here. The other thing is it told me to secure the two halves of the jig together with wood screws. And I thought, well, that's strange. I would want to bolt this thing because it's two halves. I would want to bolt this thing together. And foolishly, I followed the directions. Like, I should have gone with my better judgment, and I should have just I'm going to drill out those holes and I'm going to bolt this together so it can't move. Because inevitably, the wood screws came loose. So what's happening as I'm milling out the sides of that thing, that plastic jig is going like this. And I'm like, I can just tell this is going bad. And I'm like, it's not looking right. Things are rumbling around too much. So I take it apart. Sure enough, I had already milled through the side of the thing. And so I'm going to tell you guys right now, I don't think that the Hybrid 80 lower is a bad concept, but I'm going to suggest that you do not use the plastic jig that comes with it. I'm reading the...
Now, is this for an AR platform?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an AR hybrid jig. Or hybrid lower. So now here's what I would say. I think the hybrid lower is fine. The jig may work, but you gotta check. Like I would say, find out somebody who's done them a lot. Use their measurements rather than whatever. Like honestly, I was on their website looking at instructions. The thing didn't come with instructions, and I'm like, how many hybrid lowers are there? Am I using an old set of directions for a new jig? The whole thing was unclear. I will still say it's my fault for not finding the guy who did it right and following his directions. I pulled directions for the hybrid lower, and I have a feeling that there is more than one version.
What is it made out of? What's the material?
The jig or the lower?
The lower.
The lower is just standard polymer. I mean, it looks the same material you'd see on a Glock or whatever. So I'm still going to take some credit and say, like, I should have done that better. But I was really unhappy with the process and with that jig was some flimsy plastic. And it just didn't function the way I felt like it should function.
What I've used when I've done 80%ers back before it was illegal here in California.
Right.
As I've shared, I no longer have any 80%ers. I do have all the jig. I do have a bunch of blanks, but right now they're still pieces of metal, and that's all they are.
Yep.
I've used 5dtactical.com. I used their jig, their 80% lowers. Been very happy with them, very happy with the jig. About the only thing I screwed up on the jig is I used a router, and you can really I've gone through several of the bits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just one of those things you got to be aware of. But it takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour to mill it out, and you're good to go.
Not bad at all.
No, it's great. Love it.
Hey, these jigs are not bad here. And ships in 4 to 6 weeks. That is...
If it's 4 to 6 weeks, it's because they backed up. Because I'm telling you, man, back when I did it, back in the day, I mean, it's been several years now. It was like you order it and you got it in a few days.
That, I tell you what, though, well, if you look at 80 lower, what is it, 80%lower.com or 80% arms, whatever is it, they have a 12-week backup, man.
Is that what they're at now?
And so I'm like, 4 to 6 is a whole lot better than 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Anyway, that was my bummer review. Don't write off hybrid lowers, but be real cautious of those jigs. I would just say use a legit jig. Don't use a piece of plastic crappy jig that comes with it.
Man, I'm seeing that they got finally some AR9 lowers and ships in 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I might need to buy one of those and then, of course, register it. Of
course,
as is required here in California.
Yeah. Of course.
But man, I'd like myself a little AR9.
Yeah. Well, hey, the other positive thing I wanted to give good news since I gave bad news. I sighted in my HoloSun optic. Just was Saturday, I sighted that thing in. And the only complaint I have is that it's too much fun and I burn more ammo than I probably should have. Because I sighted it in and I'm like, well, now this is sighted in, I should empty this mag because this is fun. But love the optic has varying, you can go from a dot to kind of the circle dot thing around it, and then levels of brightness from there. Looks great. It's a nice clean, whatever you want to call it, dot on it, although it's more than a dot. The thing looks good. And they tell you it comes zeroed. Of course, you got to put it on the gun and legitimately zero it. But I tell you what, I sighted in at 25 yards. First shot, I mean, I'm on the paper. I'm not far from bullseye on it. And so right out of the box on there, like, yeah, they're not screwing around. Like it's not way off. And so dialed that thing in a very short amount of time. Does great. It's a shake awake concept. So it essentially goes to sleep when you're not using it. And when you pick it up, it's on. And it's got a battery in it. And then on top of it, you've got solar. So that thing's going to last for, or they say 20,000 to 50,000 hours. I'm telling you too, it's such a wide field of view on that thing that like you're just eyes wide open. You feel like a cyborg, and like it just feels like you've got like your eyes are aiming naturally through it. Highly recommend it. I've got it on a pistol right now, an AR pistol, of course. And the HoloSun, it's is it the 510C? I want to say HoloSun 510. Great optic, you guys. Loving it. Not the first time I've used it. It's the first time I've owned one, and I can't say enough good about it. Definitely worth checking.
I've got the HoloSun 507C on my pistol on my Glock 17. In fact, it was funny. Just the other day, I was talking with a buddy of mine, and I was like, I really want to put a red dot on my Glock 26. But then, you start looking at it, you're like, all right, an RMR is going to cost me $500. I'm either going to buy a new slide that's milled for an RMR, or I got to buy or have my slide cut. Either way, we're looking at a few $100 there. You got to buy suppressor sights on top of it because you got to have backup iron sights and need something higher than the RMR so you can actually see it.
Yeah.
And then it hits me. I'm like, wait a second. I think that Hollow Sun was like $300. And I'm like, wait, I think I got 250 in gift cards for rifle gear. I'm like, oh, now we're in shooting distance here. I'm only spending $50 and then I got to, either buy a new slide or have it milled, but it's not looking so bad anymore. So I might be doing that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting hooked on the RMR styles, man. It's just cool. Did you conceal carry your RMR?
Yeah. That's my primary conceal.
Yeah. Yeah. It is just so easy to get on target, man. And then as we talked about before, if you need to one-handed chamber around, just find a table.
Easy. Yeah. That sucker's so huge.
Yeah. Bell loop, like you're good to go.
Well, I started, in the last few, 6 months or so, I decided, okay, when I do handgun challenges, I'm going to be shooting my primary concealed carry because I want that adrenaline pump. And then, using my concealed gun. I mean, I'm not competing against, I'm not a real competitive shooter, right? Like the guys who are trying to go out there, win the actual competition. I'd like to win. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I really want to train more than anything else. Yeah. So I've been shooting my RMR, and it was so funny because last week we had a handgun challenge on Thursday. Very first stage, as soon as I pull, I'm like, oh crap, dude, where's the dot? Like I must have knocked it down, hit something. I could not see the dot, so I had to use the iron backups. But I was like, this is why you have suppressor sights on it, because if there's no red dot, you got to use the iron backups. And so it sucked. And then the next stage and all the rest of it, I was fine because I just, adjusted it. So I must have accidentally turned it down. And I heard that the new Hollow Suns, they have a feature on it that'll lock it in so you can't accidentally turn it down, which would be nice because then I wouldn't have had that problem had I had it locked in. So anyway,
that would be nice.
Yeah.
Well, sorry that went bad initially, but man, and you know what though? That's the kind of thing that could happen in a real life scenario.
Exactly.
Those are the things that you got to be ready for. I had a gun that I wasn't really a gun that I would use for conceal carry, but I was training on it some and realized that I kept flipping the safety on, like the placement of the safety. I kept bumping it accidentally. And so here safety's off, but as I'm going up to shoot, I'm knocking it on without realizing. I'm like, what the heck is wrong? And that's those kind of things. You start paying attention, one, to overcome them. And then second, you might be like, this might not be the gun I want to carry, right. Depending. Good stuff, man. Well, this is fun. Anything else we need to talk about today?
No, probably just give Lake Erie their plug.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, Lake Erie Arms, of course, we give them a plug every week. I do want to say we do have some exciting things in motion. Without going into great detail, you need to be signing up for training if you haven't already. Conceal carry training, whatever, learms.net. And we are looking at adding some things online. So actually, Freedom Nation, if you're interested in buying some stuff online from Lake Erie Arms, jump on our Facebook page. Let us know what kind of things you'd like to see offered online. Because obviously right now we got training, but might be selling some other stuff. So let us know. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Keep at it, Freedom Nation, and we will talk to you next week.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.